Aloha, namaste. This is Alexis Rada Home, and I am here to offer a new moon report for this coming Thursday, July 28th. At 7:55 a.m. Hawaii time, which is 10:55 a.m. Pacific Daylight Time. We're going to have the moon and sun come together in sidereal Cancer in the star of Pushya. Pushya is often referred to as the nourisher, and it means nourishment or to nourish, but it also is the topmost part of a flower or a plant and shows how everything, um, when it's nurtured, when it's nourished, can bloom into something as beautiful as a flower, something that has so much to offer everyone who sees it and experiences it, much like a person who is endowed with spiritual gifts, who practices and spends time nourishing that part of themselves, becomes like a flower to everybody that meets them. They're attractive. People want to be near that person. There's a saying, everybody couldn't, my family couldn't stand me when I came home a Buddhist, but when I came home as the Buddha, everybody loved me. And this is that part of us when we're on a spiritual path where we sort of come in and try to preach to everyone what we believe and what we know and all the things that we think, and in hopes to somehow persuade other people to follow the path that we found that's lit us up so much. But what really compels people to follow on a path that you're on is not preaching, and it's not, it's definitely not didactic downward teaching. It's not shaming them for the beliefs they have or making them feel like that something is more right over here. What really magnetizes people to a path is to see those who are already on it and see them like flowers, to see them as so beautiful and attractive and radiant, and just wanting to be around more of that. And so that is one of the qualities that Pushya really has. Pushya is ruled over by Brihaspati, who is the utmost priest, the highest priest. And he was born as someone who was just on that divine path. And so Shiva granted him the power over the planet Jupiter. And so Brihaspati is like Jupiter. And Jupiter is the planet of wisdom and ideals and expansion, magnanimity, the capacity to really stretch ourselves to give to everyone around us, as opposed to feeling like everything's very, miserly and limited. And if somebody over there gets something, then I won't get anything over here. Jupiter teaches us to expand more, and that there's always more room. The more room we make, the more room that actually becomes. Jupiter is exalted in the sign of Pushya, in the star of Pushya. And we can see this is really why, because ultimately our highest wisdom, our highest teachings, our highest spirituality comes when we have a lot of love to give, and a lot of expansion, and a lot of capacity to see beyond the dictates of religion, or even the, sort of snobbish morality of what is right and what is wrong, and see things like a mother sees her child, right? We might prefer our child to behave. We certainly do. But ultimately, children are not little adults. They are not, their behavior is not bad. It's just upsetting to our status quo and to the way our society is run, which is largely adult friendly and not necessarily geared towards families and children and community and all things like that. So in Pushya, we remember that in a sense, we're all children. We're all still children. And the behavior that we look at as bad is not a reason to not love someone, or to even distance ourselves from someone. It's simply a cry for something. It's a cry for a need that's not being met. And a lot of times when the moon transits Cancer, it's in her own sign. So we have a really deep capacity to feel our emotions. And sometimes that can become overwhelming, right? When we have, especially other planets there, which we do at the moment, because it's a new moon, we have the sun and the moon together. So there's this capacity to feel overwhelmed by our emotions at times, especially if there's nothing to catch them, especially if we don't have something solid to roll into with our emotions and we feel uncontained or unheld. And Pushya offers us that opportunity to really nourish ourselves and nurture ourselves and give ourselves the food we need, the milk we need in order to feel fed and to feel full and to feel, you know, as though it's okay to have feelings and that it's all right that we feel the way we do. We have a tendency, especially those of us who, aren't children right now, because I believe this is changing. I think parents now are really starting to become aware of how important it is to teach children to express their feelings. But many of us grew up when that wasn't really the case. And so we have trouble expressing our feelings. We actually feel like it's wrong to have feelings. And if we, have too many feelings or they're, negative feelings like sadness or anger, that will be shunned or will be pushed away and we won't be accepted. And so it can be really hard to accept ourselves and our state of feeling and to accept others, even in our state of feeling. If we feel harshly about ourselves when we have feelings, then that also speaks to how we treat others and how we feel about other people expressing their feelings. So this is a a new moon cycle that's really allowing us to feel all the feelings, feel all the feels, as people say, but also to really find that part of us that is both mother and child, that is the one who can nourish ourselves, because we do live in the society we live in, and most of us here listening to this at least are adults. We don't have an unconditionally loving mom to give us everything we didn't get when we were little, or everything we felt like we should have gotten along the way. So we have to learn how to self nurture. And this can be as simple as taking time away from others, or journaling, or taking a bath. Meditating is, of course, always a way to just take a slice out of time and sort of clear the mind and clear the emotions of whatever we're feeling, but not deny them. This isn't a situation where we want to sort of deny our feelings or bypass them. We just want to allow ourselves to feel them, but also allow ourselves to move on to the next thing. One of the qualities of the moon, which rules Cancer, is that it's always changing, right? The moon is the thing that's moving the fastest out of all the grahas, out of all the planetary bodies, seen or unseen, Chaya Graha included, Rahu and Ketu, the nodes, that it's the one that's moving. It's the one that's always moving the fastest. Venus and Mercury and the sun, from our perspective here on Earth, also move fairly quickly, but that's weeks, whereas the moon moves daily. So our emotions are like that. Our emotions are moving daily. They're up, they're down, they're, the beginning of the day, you might feel one way, by the end of the day, you feel another way. We feel things based on how other people react to us and how other people hold us or don't hold us. We feel feelings based on things we see. If you watch television, you're going to feel emotions based on the different things that you choose to watch. If you go into a store and see a fight happening or something, that's going to affect your emotions. Or if you go to the ocean and sit by the waves, that also will affect your emotions. So this new moon is really important time to dial into things that give you calm feelings and that allow you to feel what you need to feel, but also to release that and to move on. Water is always indicated whenever we have a water sign. So being near the water can be really helpful. It can help us even release our tears and then, move forward from that place. I'm going to share my screen so that we can see the chart here that we have. So this is the sun and the moon here in sidereal Cancer. And I know this is a new moon in Leo for many of you who follow Western astrology. But this is the placement that we actually can see here from Earth. If you take a telescope or to take your app and look at the sky, you'll see that these luminaries are actually in Cancer, not in the constellation of Cancer, not quite yet in Leo. The moon moves again so quickly that the moon will be in Leo soon after, and will certainly be feeling plenty of fire in this cycle because we have Mars and Rahu moving closer together. I spoke about this a lot in my full moon video a couple weeks ago, and I did a report specifically just on this Mars Rahu conjunction. And if you haven't yet read that, you can go to my website at www.radhahomeyoga.com. And I have a report where I broke down for all 12 rising signs what Mars Rahu conjunction means for you. So, what house this is. This is Aries. This is the sign of Aries. What house is this in your chart? For Aries people, it's their first house. And by Aries people, I don't mean your sun in Aries in the Western system. I mean your rising sign, your lagna is Aries in the Vedic system, in the sidereal calculation. And for Taurus people, then of course it becomes your 12th house, which is quite different from the first house. It's the house of the unseen, the hidden, that which we're not paying attention to. The first house is you and your body and your personality. It's going to be a very different experience. This would be more like hidden anger for a Taurus person and more like right on the front end for an Aries person. And of course, for each of the rising signs, it's going to be very different depending on what house it is for them. So if you haven't yet, you can check out that report. But that conjunction, as it moves to exact on August 1st, is really beginning to heat up. Now, Mars is in his own sign of Aries, where we have a lot of strength, we have a lot of confidence, we have a lot of discipline and courage, but it's also still pretty fiery. And Aries is a sign where we are quick to start, slow to finish. We don't always finish what we start. And it's also where we're very much in our own agenda. It's like, this is what I need to do, and I'm not as concerned about what everyone else needs to do. Well, when the nodes are in this placement with Rahu in Aries and Ketu in Libra, and I've been talking about this a lot as well since this alignment began in March, in the middle of March, then the nodes moved into this placement. We're not just obsessed with our own starting and our own agenda and what we need to do and the competitions we need to fight and the strengthening of our own body, but we're also actively pulling away from harmony, getting along with others, compromising, trying to come to fair and equitable deals. We're actively pulling away from the Libra part of ourselves. So this is one of the reasons that this alignment is very harsh, because Rahu and Ketu are not in signs that are very becoming to them. Rahu in a fire sign tends to disperse the fire. So it takes that anger and it sprays it out all over the place. Fire does really well when it's contained by earth. And so we have, a fire pit, and we start a fire in that pit, and the earth keeps the fire from blowing all over the place. When it's a windy day, fires are not even allowed to be made in places like California, where there's a lot of potential for wildfires. They actually ask you to please not start a fire because that wind will blow the fire, the sparks everywhere, and it will set things on fire. Well, if you imagine not just wildfires, which of course are very possible with this alignment, especially this time of year is when that happens. Unfortunately, much of the West Coast gets fires pretty much every year now. So it's already going to happen at some point, and this alignment really increases the odds of it happening in this time period. But it's also like our fiery emotions. If you feel a lot of anger, if you're somebody who has a very fierce competitive quality about you, or if you're very physically active and you really care about physically strengthening your body, things like this can be really exacerbated in this time, and not for the better, because while it's really good to show up again and again and practice, perhaps a sport or something that moves your body and strengthens you physically, it's not a good idea to do it erratically and excessively and have an obsession around it, right? It's good to do it in a steady, calm, consistent manner where you're not overly attached to the results. So Rahu brings about this obsession and this sort of delusion about how strong we might be, or how strong our competitor might be, or how important whatever we're doing is. It might really blow up how big of a deal something is that we get angry about, and then we make a big deal out of it, and perhaps even cause fights or battles or sever friendships over this kind of thing. it can really spray our anger. And the more you have, a natural control over your Mars energy, it will of course be better, but it really does depend on where it falls in your chart as to how it's showing up. For all of us, there's a similar remedy, which is that we need to show up in these disciplined ways to strengthen ourselves, but we need to make sure and not discipline and try to strengthen everyone else, right? We're not all the PE teachers of the world. We're not here to tell everyone else to get stronger, to get more fit, to get more courageous, to get more powerful. So it's not up to us to discipline other people. And obviously, if you are a PE teacher or you are a teacher at all or a parent, you might have to discipline your children and you might have to teach them, right from wrong. But most of us now know there are certain ways in which we do that that are less, less didactic, less sort of telling them this is what you do to be a good person. And I'm a good person telling you this is the thing to be a good person. We have more of a methodology nowadays, or at least an awareness around the fact that, we ask people how they feel and help guide them, ask children how they feel and help guide them to a resolution within themselves. So they're sort of self-learning through the process of being shown a reflection of how what they're doing is not okay for everyone else. And that's really the primary thing that we do when we're teaching people, is we show them a reflection, like I said at the beginning, of yourself as a person who's acting in a way that someone else would want to act. And then we also guide along the way so that someone else can get there, so that the child can get there. Or if you're teaching adults, if you're a therapist or something like that, you gently guide someone to come to their own conclusion, right? We don't just stand there sort of pointing our finger and telling someone what right and wrong is. Well, when Mars is in Aries, and especially with Rahu there, we might have a tendency to tell people what's right and what's wrong, because Mars has this really black and white way of seeing things. It's like, this is right, this is wrong. I'm doing this is wrong. And that logic mind works really well in battle. It works really well, if you're having to make snap decisions in a dangerous situation, or even in an athletic situation or a competition where it's like, the difference is going to be getting the goal or not getting the goal, or whatever catching your wave or not catching your wave, whatever the circumstances may be. But when we are in a not so intense situation where it's not like a hair split decision will make the difference between, winning or losing, or dying or survival, which is where these energies really come from, is our primal need to survive and our feeling that there's some kind of danger that we need to conquer or that we need to overcome. When we're in a regular everyday situation, chances are the stakes aren't very high. And we often make stakes very high. We've made making appointments on time very important. We've made even making social plans on time very important. We've elevated a lot of things to the emotional weight of life or death. But the truth of the matter is very few things actually are life or death, or even, stakes of winning or losing in a competition, which we've also elevated to life or death. The way, if you've ever seen sports fans when they're, cheering for their team or something good or bad happens for their team, the way that they express themselves, it does feel quite intense. It feels like a pitch level of life or death. if oh my God, I can't believe that person did that thing, and they're shouting and screaming and making big loud noises. So this is the kind of energy that we might find permeating throughout our life. Maybe you're driving, maybe you're just, trying to do an errand, or you're eating out. Maybe you're doing something in nature and get hurt by, whatever, by your own clumsiness and your own lack of attention, but you blame the rock, or you blame the tree, or you blame the ocean, or you blame the supermarket employee, or the driver, the bad driver on the road, whatever it is, we have a tendency to see other people's behavior already as something that makes them rude. That person's being rude, that person's being unfair, that person's being mean, that person's being inconsiderate. We rarely think of our own behavior in that same way. We often think of our own behavior as, well, I'm doing the best I can, or I'm running late for this appointment, so that justifies my driving. I really want to win, so I'm allowed to act like this. I'm making a big deal out of getting hurt because it really hurts, where somebody else is being a baby and making a big scene. So we have a tendency to think of our own behavior in terms of like the protagonist, in a story where we really relate and we understand. And we tend to think of everybody else as doing something that is not right in some way. And Mars and also Saturn are really here to teach us the opposite of that. They're to teach us how to control ourselves, how to discipline ourselves, how to strengthen ourselves, and how to create an environment where we are less reactive and more proactive or active. So with Mars, of course, we want to do things in the world. We want to initiate things in the world. We do want to start projects. But along the way, there's going to be things that are that come up that cause stress in our life. And we have a choice as to whether to act extremely stressed out about it, or to recognize that no matter how stressed out we got about it, no matter how much we yell at the other driver on the road or freak out or whatever it is that we do, it's not actually going to make the situation faster or resolved better. When you're a child, sometimes if you throw a tantrum, maybe somebody gives you what you want because they want you to stop throwing a tantrum. Well, more often than not, that's not really a very good parenting choice, because you're teaching that child again and again and again that if they throw a big scene, then they'll get what they want. Well, as adults, many people still haven't learned that. And they think, if I throw a big scene, if I make a big scene, if I make a big deal out of it, then I'll get what I want. And we do live in a consumer driven world. So a lot of places are selling you something, and they will actually give you what you want. If squeaky wheel gets the oil. If you complain, you might get a free whatever from that place, or discount, or an apology from the manager, or whatever it is you want to make yourself feel better. But at the end of the day, the best reward you could have is being able to react in a way that's centered and calm, and really taking into account how dire the situation is. Many of us might know from experience that when we actually have really emergency level situations that we experience, that we're actually quite calm. And we act very instinctively, and everything that we need to do, we do. And it's minor situations where we explode, or we get really upset, or we think it's the end of the world. And it's because we never thought we had control in the big bad situation. In the real emergency level situation, it's clear we have no control, and we're sort of in this situation of flying through grace. And we're lucky if anything gets saved. We're lucky if everybody's alive. That's all we can hope for. When it's a minor situation, we have an illusion of control. We have an illusion that there's something we can actually do about it. And of course, both Mars and Rahu are in the star of Bharani. And Bharani is where we're really working with this concept of control. It's ruled by Yama, who is the god of death. But if you are familiar with yoga, you might know the words pranayam, and you might know the yamas and niyamas. And pranayam is really that control of the breath. It's breath exercises, but they're exercises where we're choosing to count the breath or to use a specific methodology of breathing. Yamas and niyamas are adherences we make for ourselves, things like cleanliness and truthfulness. And they're also things that we offer to society, or a way that we conduct ourselves in society, which are both qualities of control as well. How do we act in society? Well, we don't harm other people. We don't lie to other people. We choose to tell the truth. These are conducts for the way we are in society. So the word yama is about control, and about whether or not we have self-control. And whether or not we have self-control in private or whether we have, self-control when we're in public and how we behave in society as large. And also, anything we're controlling, like the prana, if we're choosing to control the prana. Bharani itself is also represented by the downward triangle or the yoni, the female sexual organ. And so it indicates the need to control ourselves sexually. And that is also one of the yamas and niyamas is brahmacharya, which is the concept of containing your sexual energy. And in some lineages, it will be said abstaining from sexuality. And in others, they will talk about it more in terms of controlling and really being discerning in how you use your sexual energy. Regardless of how you think about it in terms of abstaining or discernment, there's a need for that in everything creative that we produce, whether you're producing a child or whether you're producing a piece of art. You need to have some capacity to determine what it is you're wanting to make and then have some control around that. You if you want to have a baby, you don't just sleep with a ton of different people and hopes that one day you get pregnant, or if you're a male that you impregnate someone, right? Hopefully you make a choice to do it with a specific other person so that you are two parents, and the child then, is aware of who their parents are and has two parents. If you are choosing to do it a different way, like if you're choosing to do it, in a non-traditional way, then you're making that choice and you know what the outcome of that is. Like if you're choosing to be, there's something called single mom by choice now, where women choose to, use an in vitro process in order to get pregnant, but they don't have a partner. That's a choice they're making, and they're making sure they have the financial resources to take care of this child by themselves and the social resources and all the other things they need to have in order to make that happen. Some people end up having, a pregnancy that takes them by surprise, where they don't, they didn't plan it. And oftentimes this wreaks more havoc in our lives, right? Because we don't know, we weren't planning on it, so we don't have everything sort of set for it. But as many of us know, regardless of how much you plan, once you have a child, it's like, surprise, having a child is very hard, regardless of how much you plan, regardless of your resources, regardless of your support system. Having a child, especially in today's society, is extremely hard. So you want to know the consequences of what it is that you're choosing to create. And Bharani also has to do with that, consequences. The word Bharani is to bear, and we have to bear the consequences of whatever it is we chose to create. More often than not, we didn't put a lot of forethought into things, and we end up having to bear the results of that. Sometimes we put a lot of thought and effort into something and it turns out very different than how we wanted it to be. Certainly that's another thing that can be related to just the creativity of a child, is that you might have planned your birth to be a certain way and it didn't work out to be that way, or you might have really wanted to have a girl child and you end up with a boy, or you might have planned to whatever you thought you were planning to do, it didn't necessarily work out the way that you wanted it to. We all have a lot of ideas about how something will be, but along the way we have to be flexible and we have to work with what comes. Well, this Mars Rahu alignment is really going to teach us a lot about being adaptable in situations and how adaptable we are already. So if you are not a very adaptable person and you're somebody who really likes things to be your way and you have a hard time adjusting to other people, then this alignment is probably going to bring out parts of you that you're not used to seeing or that you don't relate to or know about yourself as much. Because Ketu is in Libra, it's the place where we're not looking right now. So we're not looking at our relational skills. We're not looking at how well we compromise. And we might fancy that we do that really well. Wherever Ketu is, we have a lot of past experience and knowledge. Since this is a transit, this isn't in any particular person's natal chart, this isn't saying, you have all this past life experience with relating to people and compromising. This is actually an indication that collectively, all of us are going through a transit where we're choosing not to look at this place. And we all have some wisdom here, right? This is probably not too many people's first time here. and we've all lived a certain amount of life already, and we have some experience and some wisdom in the Libra area, even if, even if in your own natal chart that's where Rahu is and Ketu's in Aries. And so whatever that wisdom is, we're choosing not to use it as much now because we're more obsessed with ourself and our own agenda and what we can, what we can make happen, what we can start. But if we don't look at something, it eventually explodes underneath us. And that's really what K2 shows us. It's an implosion. It's showing something going deep, deep down underneath the surface and silently exploding and coming to the surface and making itself known. So both the nodes have an erratic quality. K2's feels more erratic because we're not even paying attention at all. It seems like it comes out of nowhere. So don't be surprised if your relationships have an explosive quality all of a sudden out of nowhere. Somebody's very upset at you, or very, or you're very upset at someone else, because you weren't paying attention to that. You weren't paying attention to that quality. Whereas the North Node, Rahu, has you hyper obsessed with all the things you're angry about and all the strengthening you're trying to do and all the discipline you're trying to create, without enough regard for the other parties that might be part of what it is you're trying to create, or that might just be support system in your life while you go about whatever your agenda is. So this is something that's really going to make this Rahu Ketu axis pop, this Mars Rahu conjunction. And again, it's exact on August 1st. So great time for pranayam, great time for those breath exercises. Maybe not the ones that really rile you up like breath of fire, or Bhastrika, but perhaps the more calming ones. And this is also a really good time to, cool off and earth. So spend some time in nature, especially if it's not, a desert landscape, especially if you have an opportunity to be in the shade of trees or near a lake or a river, or the ocean, something that can really cool you off. And of course, with the Cancer new moon, the ocean, or water will be a great choice for you. So we do have a few other things I'm going to talk about very quickly because this has gotten longer than I thought. But Saturn is officially back in Capricorn now. He was just in on the full moon 2 weeks ago, and now he's a little bit more solidly in, and we might be seeing some return to things that we visited in 2020 and 2021, both socially and personally. So whatever it is that you really had to work through in that time, and whatever you chose to commit to, and whatever really humbled you and made you realize the ways in which you're alone in this world, those things are coming back to roost in many ways, but they're coming back in a sort of more thoughtful and internalized way. Because Saturn is retrograde, we're having an opportunity to review. We're having an opportunity to internalize whatever it is that we experienced, especially in 2021, I would say, because the degrees of Saturn, it started in 2020, January 2020, and we moved through that whole year. And Saturn went retrograde then, and then he went forward, and he went retrograde again in 2021. So really, we're looking at the later part of the Saturn transit from about mid 2021 until 2022, when he entered Aquarius at the end of April for just a brief moment. This is really the window of what we committed to, what we, decided to spend our time on, and what really truly brought us to our knees. This is the stuff that Saturn teaches us again and again and again through these long, slow transits, through these retrograde periods where we really have to be sure of what we're committed to. And we really need to sometimes take extra time with things because we don't learn the first time through. Maybe we think we got really humbled, but then as soon as we come back up again, we're rearing to go and we forget all the lessons we learned. So Saturn's here to remind us again. And he's here to make sure that we're really, committing with a strong foundation, that we're not missing the bottom part of whatever it is we're building, that we're really establishing ourselves in ways where, if you're, for example, for people who are Cancer risings or Leo risings, this is happening in the 7th house. The 7th house is Aquarius for Leo risings, and the 7th house is Capricorn for Cancer risings. So Saturn's going back and forth between 6th and 7th for Leos and 7th and 8th for Cancers. So it's asking you to reflect upon the relationships you're committing to. And for each of us, it's going to be a different area of life. But if you are in a relationship with someone and you sort of wanted that really bad, but maybe rushed there and didn't form the foundation of friendship first, or, making sure you had the same values, making sure you wanted the same things, or that your lives were able to be meshed, well, this is going to come up. This is going to come up for you, that those things weren't established, that foundation wasn't set. And in order to build and really commit to somebody, you need to have those things set early on, because if not, at some point it will explode. At some point it will be a problem. So we can look at Saturn in this sort of painful way where we're being dragged through time and it feels like it will never end. Or we can look at it in a way where it's like, wow, thank goodness we have more time. Thank goodness we have more time to really think about that or revise. It's like if you're in school and you had a deadline for a paper and then your teacher made you turn in your paper on time and you felt like, maybe I did okay, maybe I didn't do okay. And then they all of a sudden decide after everyone turns it in, well, now you all get more time. So they give you back your paper for another week and you get another week to really look it over and really know. And how much better is that even if you got some feedback on your first time through, so that you are able to come back with a fresh perspective. So the fact that Saturn even jumped into Aquarius for a short amount of time was an opportunity for us to get a little bit of feedback on what we committed to and how it was working out. When April 28th, I believe, was the when Saturn moved into Aquarius. Is it the 23rd or 28th? I'm forgetting right now, but from then until early June, he was forward moving in Aquarius. And how was that working? What were the results good, or were they sort of fake? Were they predicated on false information or flimsy foundation? And also in this cycle, what we have that we did not have in 2020 and 2021 is that Jupiter's in his own sign of Pisces. So we have a lot more wisdom flowing right now, a lot more capacity for that expansion and that magnanimity and that, potential and capacity to really understand high truths. When we had 2020 and 2021, Jupiter was in Saturn's own signs of Capricorn, where he's debilitated, and Aquarius, where he also doesn't do quite as well. So Saturn really, gave us kind of a constrictive view. And when I was talking about Jupiter earlier, and how Jupiter in Cancer really offers us this opportunity to see things like a mother and like a child, with a lot of love flowing and a lot of forgiveness for behavior. Jupiter in Capricorn is more like consequences, and like, again, that life and death, and everything's constrictive and there's only a couple choices and one choice is death, and it's this sort of harsh mentality, which works really well for Saturn, because Saturn in his own sign is able to teach us that humility and able to teach us that ultimately we will die, and able to remind us of some of the hard things in life. But with Jupiter's energy, we want to be expansive. We want to be wise. We want to move beyond the limitations of this world and move into, a higher, more, more loving vibration, where we can see potential for anything. And in Capricorn particularly, but even Aquarius, there's so much fear. It's really hard to do that. So we have a lot of blessing here with Jupiter in his own sign. And Venus is also now, well into Gemini. So we have a potential for our relationships to have some give and take. Gemini is where we're very cerebral. There's a lot of mental energy and a lot of talking in relationships and things like that. But it's also an opportunity to be really fair in our relationships, to really make sure we're giving and taking, to bring back, some of the things like conversation that might be really important. Sometimes we get very, especially in romantic relationships, we can get very physical and forget to have those friend conversations where we make sure that we have a strong friendship. So Venus and Gemini can really help reestablish that for people, and just in general make our sense of happiness come from a more easygoing, friendly, even funny place. And that will be a breath of fresh air in this climate of Mars and Rahu heating up. So I hope all this is helpful for you. I attempted to keep this short, but it ended up going longer than I thought. But I really mostly for this particular cycle want people to reflect on their emotions and their capacity to sit with their emotions instead of pushing them away or avoiding them, really allowing yourself to be with whatever it is you feel and being okay with that. Again, like that mother and a child, like you're a kid, you're allowed to feel whatever it is you're feeling. And also, you're like a mother or a parent who is going to soothe and nurture and nourish or kiss the boo boo, put a band aid on it, make it better. And we make it better with love. We make it better with kindness, and we make it better with empathy. And, this is really a balm in many ways to the heat that's raising with the Mars Rahu conjunction, because this whole cycle that we're setting off on has this vibration to it. Even though the sun has already been in sidereal Cancer for a little bit, and even though the moon will move on quickly, we will really have this opportunity to have the whole cycle have a cooling, soothing, nourishing quality to it. And actually, I didn't mention, I meant to mention, but I forgot to mention that Mercury is in Cancer as well, at 24 degrees in Aslacia. And this can bring up some communication that is a bit emotional. Mercury doesn't necessarily do great in the water signs. He's debilitated in Pisces, where we're really out at sea. But oftentimes I find that Scorpio and Cancer Mercury can be even more challenging, because there's a lot more emotional interchange with other people. With Pisces, sometimes it gets into the really spiritual kind of woo-woo arena, where we get lost to what we're thinking or what we're saying. But with Cancer, there's this quality of, if we feel like our feelings are being hurt or someone doesn't care about us, we might really express that back to people. And we have trouble sharing our feelings in responsible ways sometimes. It can be even worse with Scorpio, because there's the quality of sort of sting first. There's that fiery Marsian quality. But in Cancer, I think the key is really to express your feelings, because so often we've been taught, especially those of us who are adults, maybe over the age of 35, who aren't who weren't taught any kind of nonviolent communication, or that it was okay to express our feelings. We really have to work actively at that. Instead of expressing what we feel through blame or thoughts or opinions, we really need to work to express what we feel by literally just saying what we feel, and holding space for ourselves, that that's okay. Even if no one else can hold that space for you, even if you don't have someone else in your life willing to hold that space for you, you might be surprised that people are much more receptive when you say how you feel than when you turn that feeling into something. Like if you feel angry, but instead of saying, I feel angry, you say, I feel mad because you did this thing and that was wrong. And I have the right to feel angry because of that, which is usually what the subtext is that I have the right to have this feeling because that's inherently wrong. That thing you did is inherently wrong. Well, of course, that's, going to make the other person get defensive, because of course the thing they did doesn't feel inherently wrong to them. It goes back to that protagonist antagonist quality, where we always think that we're doing the best we can. Someone else is being inherently wrong, And so we have we have to really be careful with how we express things. And oftentimes we think we're expressing our feelings because we're feeling them while we're expressing, but that's expecting everyone else to be either a mind reader or to have no feelings themselves, to have such mastery over their own emotions that when they're attacked or when they're blamed, they are able to sit with that and still have empathy for you. And that's not that's not very many people that are going to be able to do that. So the more we're able to really with integrity express our feelings with this Mercury in Cancer, instead of sort of trying to express our feelings, but really masking with blame or opinions or even thoughts on things, the better the results will be. Because the point with Mercury in Cancer is we're really wanting to connect. We're wanting our communication to be connective. And while Venus is in Gemini and there might be some funniness and some objectivity, there can also be a potential for hurt feelings and the need to to really be kind and gentle with others is there, but really to be kind and gentle with ourselves and to just own our feelings and know that it's all right that we have them. And that's where it starts. It starts with accepting ourselves and accepting our own feelings. And from there, whether or not someone else does or doesn't becomes less relevant, because you're holding that space for yourself. So I hope that's helpful, and I offer you many blessings on this new moon and on this cycle in general, especially as we really heat up here with Mars and Rahu. Namaste. And if you haven't already signed up for my newsletter, you will receive that Mars Rahu for all 12 signs that I spoke about. There's also Jupiter and Pisces for all 12 signs, and Rahu Ketu in this Aries Libra axis for all 12 signs. Those are the 3 free reports that are coming out right now. You can sign up at www.radhahomeyoga.com. It'll be down at the bottom of the screen. And you'll also receive the bi-monthly forecast I do for the full and new moon. So if that interests you, then I will see you on the newsletter. Aloha.